and it's so nice to see everyone again virtually. You're on Music and Chat with Shueh-li Ong, and it's a good morning from me to you in Singapore. Please say hi and let us where you're tuning in from, and don't be backward and coming forward. So we're in phase 2, post Singapore's version of the lockdown, and foodies are now flocking to their favorite haunts for their tasty morsel, but restrictions are still in place. So to everyone out there who are flocking, please stay safe and stay well. Please put any questions you have as well in the live comments area, and I shall address them as we move along. Please say hi to me. I see these virtual bodies lurking around on my live stream. Come join the party. We have Sam from Sydney, Australia, Bill Lynch from Doylestown, Pennsylvania, and thanks, Bill, for saying good morning. And it's a good evening from me to you in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. Who else is lurking around the corner? Come on, make yourselves known. Ah, I see Bruce as well. Bruce, the famous Bruce Phoenix. Bruce, I never did recall where you live. Are you on the West Coast? And we have Frederick. We have someone from Frederick, Maryland. Someone. I know that photo. I just don't recall your name. Thanks so much for joining us. Who else is out there? I haven't been to Maryland in ages. I don't think I've ever driven through Frederick, Maryland. So I know it's still early where I am, but it's late where you might be, except for Sam in Sydney, Australia. But I do have a couple of pieces I want to play for you. Last week I played you a song. A working title was the title of the song, along with its instrumental companion, a working title da capo, both available from my Bandcamp store. In fact, the working title has a music video, and it is on my YouTube channel, so if you're interested, go look for it. Today I have another piece, another song from my 4th album. Same album. It's called I'm Leaving You a Message, and the song is about the culture we live in, where texting is such a popular activity, and it's about people who text to each other even though they're bodily present in the same room or same environment. They rather text than talk to each other. Okay, so, and the second piece is an instrumental, Izeibilz II. Some of you have heard it before, but it is one of my favorite pieces to play, especially right after a song. It's a little quiet, a little emoting on a theremin permitted. Okay, so let's bring up my theremin cam. Here we are, and let's get the party started. The first one is I'm Leaving You a Message, and the second piece is Izeibilz II. I sit next to you while you stare at your hand. I try to talk to you, but I'm not getting anywhere. Something or somebody's always caught in my way. I'm leaving you a message. See you one fine day. Interference, you are a bad connection, like a droplet in a waterfall, drowning my voice in your noise. I try to make polite our conversation about what you're doing and the music that you play. But when the phone rings, you are lost in your own world. I'm leaving you a message. See you one fine day. Whenever I'm with you, you stare at your phone, or someone's on their way. You've got to get home, but whenever I call, I have to leave my number at the tone. You tell me that your world revolves around me. But whenever I call, you're not on the line. For me, I see. So, there you go. I'm leaving you a message, and Izeibilz II. Izeibilz II is a component of my yet to be released concerto, which I have been threatening to throw in its completion to all my friends, but it's taking a while to get recorded. So let's see who else has joined us so far. Gary. Oh, thank you, Gary. Yes, it is one of my favorite songs, obviously. That's why I performed it last week. Hi from Sigmage. So tell us your name and where you come from, please. But glad to have you on board. Hi, Thomas. Thomas plays with the band Kansas. Who else is here? Oh, thank you for the compliment, Bruce. Oh, okay. So, those of you who were at my last stream last week, has it been a week already? That's amazing. How time flies. Time travel, if only. So you saw a clip of my Thriller cover, Michael Jackson Thriller cover. I want to play another clip from that cover because our guest today appears there. So here we are.
To stay alive, your body starts to shiver, for no mere mortal can resist the evil of the Thriller.
So we had our guest from last week, Jeff, and our guest for today, Chris. How exciting to have both my friends on my live stream. So here's a little bit of history for you, and I love history. Those of you who know me know that. But we know that throughout the 60s and the 70s, I know you history buffs are saying way beyond that and way before that. There were feverish efforts in the exploration of new music synthesis, giving us fantastical beasts possessing user interfaces that resemble items that emerged from the wild imagination of prop makers of sci-fi movies. Synthesizers became small enough to take home to mother, and not the ones resembling small rooms. If you were here during our live stream with Herb Deutsch, you remember we mentioned how the RCA Mark II, aka Victor, was the size of various closets in a small room. So, of course, the introduction of some of these fantastical beasts also came with a price to match. Assuming you're a millionaire, you can afford it. If not, sorry. As they would say, in your dreams. Our guest today, though, was rewarded with such a fantastical beast. The Dartmouth Digital Synth was its original uninspiring name. We know it better as the Synclavier or Synclavier, depending on where you are from. You can call it either or. It was the Synclavier II that our guest managed to be rewarded with. He hounded Denny Jaeger, who was the NAD West Coast distributor at that time. Denny Jaeger, of course, was a prominent producer and synthesist who strongly influenced the the design of Synclavier version 2. This was in 1982, and a few years later, our friend Chris would have 3 Synclavier 2s and 1 in spare parts. Of course, we know this as happening during Michael Jackson's Bad tour. Let's check out a clip of a montage of scenes from this tour. So that was in the mid-80s. Can you imagine? We're almost 4 decades later. Is that right? 80s, 90s? Almost 3.5 decades later, and it still looks fantastic, doesn't it? The instruments themselves. I just want to say hello to my good friend Mike Brunt from Eugene, Oregon. Before we bring in our special guest, let us do it, shall we? Let's call Chris Currell. Chris. Here we are. Chris?
Hello.
We can hear you. We can't see you yet.
Oh,
It'll take
it always
a
seems
while.
to come on.
Yeah, I think so.
Without to turn
Yeah.
the video.
Let me just adjust your volume. Okay. Yep. You're not peaking anymore.
Oh, good.
Everybody, please give a warm welcome to Chris Currell.
Hello.
So, Chris, of course, there are burning questions about one very important piece of equipment that you have been in the possession of, and that's a Synclavier. We all know about it, but no one has touched it, and you are the only culprit. So there are many questions about the Synclavier to start off with, obviously, and after that, I have many questions about the work that you have been doing since the heydays, obviously. And there will be questions from our viewers as well. We've got quite a few. You are a popular guest today. Quite a few people have turned up from East Coast, West Coast, North and South of America. Not South America, but the southern states. Australia and Singapore too. So there you go. We're tri-coastal.
Yeah, and I'm in Japan, so we're
And
actually kind of close.
That's right. There you go. This is just fantastic. So, all right. So, my previous guests to the live stream, people that I have invited to share the time with us, we have so far been talking about synthesizers with a keyboard interface as an input device. And of course, the Minimoog has been a popular and very life-changing event/device in our synthesis culture. But as a guitar player, you want to get involved in this new scene, but the keyboard was a no-no for you. So tell us a bit about how you then stumbled across the Synclavier, because this discovery was very much part of this search for something that could be useful to you as a guitar player.
Yeah. My early background was I was playing a lot of heavy music, in power trios with guitar.
Oh.
And I remember, I forgot where I saw it somewhere, but the first Minimoog, somebody was playing it, and it had just come out, and had all these great sounds, and my ears just lit up. And I said, wow, but it was attached to a keyboard, and I wasn't a keyboard player. So I thought that world of sounds was not accessible to me at that time. Mm. So I was very disgruntled about this. And then more and more bands came out, like Emerson, Lake and Palmer and Yes, and using, Moogs and so on and so forth. And I was getting so frustrated because I really liked that kind of music. And at one point I thought maybe I'll just switch to bass so I can be in a band with all those keyboards.
Oh, wow.
But I didn't do that. I couldn't do that. I mean, I tried, but I couldn't do it. But then along came some interesting interfaces, to the synthesizer, basically pitch to voltage, things. And I got really excited about this when I started reading about it. This was really the starting cutting edge of this kind of technology. And I just started dreaming how cool it would be on the guitar, bending notes and having, all that kind of fluidity with synthesizer sounds. And of course, it was not what I imagined it to be. I remember the first time I tried to play some of these things, there were so many delays and glitches and didn't respond anything like what I thought it should. Mm. So the technology was really new, and so it really was almost not practical at all. Mm. But I kept checking, and meanwhile, as far as my guitar, I started adding tons and tons and tons of effects boxes and stuff, trying to get different sounds. Mm. But then one day I was at the AES convention in LA, and I saw the first Synclavier, and it was a Synclavier II. And there was no sampling or anything like this. It was just basically additive and FM synthesis and this type of thing. But it sounded so good, and it had a 16-track digital memory recorder in it, so you could just play stuff. And I thought, well, this is interesting because it had a terminal, so you could go in and, excuse me, and change all kinds of parameters this way. Mm. So I thought, maybe I can just slow all these things down and play my parts on a keyboard and then speed them back up, Maybe I don't need a guitar interface. And so that's kind of how I started out, is that approach, and eventually I sort of kind of learned keyboards a little bit. It's just from doing all that stuff. But still, the guitar interfaces weren't very good. And the Synclavier progressed, and I started getting a lot. I finally was able to get my own because they were very expensive. But it was still the Synclavier II, and I remember that the company New England Digital first came out with sampling for the Synclavier, and it was direct to disc, so it was monophonic, but extremely hi-fi. Because in the meantime, I had checked out the Fairlight, and they had sampling, but it was quite lo-fi. It wasn't up to normal recording standards, but it was very interesting. But then, that played out of RAM. But the Synclavier played back from a hard disk. That's one of the reasons at the time it could play such high quality, playback. But it was monophonic. But what was interesting is that they had a software that you could strip off the voices onto a recording, and so you could get polyphony. So this was quite interesting. You could lock it up with SMPTE timecode, and you'd play in, for example, a string part, and if it was polyphonic, you could use a synthesizer sound that was similar, and play the part in, and then replace that sound with the sampled sound in the memory recorder of the Synclavier, and then go on the tape recorder, and in this mode, you just push a button, and it would lock up, and it would play through the tune that you played, but it would pull off one voice onto the tape. And then you'd go back, and it would eliminate that previous voice and play the next voice, and then play it back in and again until all the voices were stripped off. So it was a kind of a tedious process, but it actually worked. So you could get, all these really high quality voices in polyphonic. Of course, later then they came out with polyphonic, sampling, and then that was really cool. And meanwhile, while I started doing lots of production work using the machine, because back then it was a very elitist machine. Not everybody had one, and it was the most advanced at the time for sure. And they couldn't get one. Most musicians couldn't afford it. How I afforded mine was a story in itself to be told on another time. But I was able to make it go right because I really wanted this. So it was pretty cool. Then one day I ended up talking to Michael Jackson on the phone. You mentioned Denny Jaeger. I was at his house. We were actually exploring doing film scores together as a team. And and he had this big Synclavier in his studio. And one day he went out to get some groceries or something, and I was at his house. We were making a big demo, for movie stuff to send off producers and things. And the phone rings, and it's Michael Jackson. And he asked to speak to Denny, and I said he's not here. And we just started talking a little bit, and he just said he wanted Denny to come down to his house because he had previously also been at Michael's house making sounds on Michael's Synclavier. He had a Synclavier. So we chatted a bit, and I told him I'd deliver the message. And then I told Denny, and he was, thank you, To make a long story short, he wasn't really interested in going down to Michael's, because we were in San Francisco doing this, and Michael's in L.A. And so he wasn't really interested in going down there to make sounds, because first of all, he said his studio was better than Michael's, so if he could do better stuff up there, on his own time without all, strange gear and the travel and so on and so forth. But he didn't want to lose the connection, so he kind of just put Michael off, and Michael kept calling. And again, another day he was out, and Michael calls, and we started chatting again. And he really wanted, Denny to come down and make sounds. Michael didn't know how to run the machine. So I asked Denny, I said, look, since you don't want to go down and do the sounds, but you don't want to lose the connection, why don't I do it under the auspices of your company?
Yeah.
I thought it was a good idea that way, because it's his connection and it's not my connection.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because he thought about it, and then he said, nope, don't want to do that. And I went, what? I thought that was such a good idea.
Yeah.
And the reason I wanted to do it is because I needed some money.
Yeah.
Times were difficult back then.
Yeah. So
I gave that up. Anyway, we finished the demo. I went back to L.A. because I was living in L.A. Mm-hmm. And I remember a good friend of mine, Kevin Maloney, which we later had a production team for like 10 years together. He was the product specialist at New England Digital in L.A. And he also had been asked by Michael to come out and make sounds. So he would do that once in a while. But he lived in way down by Long Beach. Oh. Michael's, in L.A., so that was a long drive. And plus, he had a full-time job, so he couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So I said to him, well, since you can't do it, would you mind if, putting in a recommendation for me? He said, yeah, sure. He says, because I can't go down there and I can't go there and do it all the time. I got this job. So he did. And I waited, I don't know, a couple of weeks. And then Michael's secretary called and said, Michael wants to have you come out to the house. And I said, oh, okay, cool, But Michael wants you to teach him the Synclavier. I said, oh, teach him the Synclavier. That was new. So So I put together a program for him because I did teaching, and put together a nice program that so he could get up and running and run the machine himself. But then he was busy for another couple of weeks. I don't know what he was doing, but finally he calls and says, can you come out? It was his secretary. Can you come out and on Sunday, which was just a couple of days, in the morning and do show him how to do the Synclavier stuff? And I said, sure. So I ended up going out there to his house on early Sunday morning. He comes in the studio, introduced himself, and he said that he wanted me to teach him. The thing is that he had programmers before this, and they weren't really musical, so he couldn't really communicate with them. So he decided maybe if he could do it himself, it'd be more direct to the music. Makes sense. So I told him, okay, we'll start here with this floppy disk. and he says, and he told me, he says, I don't know anything about technology. I said, no problem, And so I said, you take this floppy disk, and he said, immediately, time out. I don't know what a floppy disk is. So I said, oh, okay. So I had to, kind of go even more basic. But after about 3 hours, I told him, showed him how to boot up the Synclavier and call up sounds to the terminal so he could get a whole list of various sounds in the library and be able to call them to the keyboard so he could mess around and do whatever he wanted to do. And then he just said that that's all he could take for today. You come back tomorrow for a session.
Yeah.
This is at his house, his studio at his house.
Yeah.
I said, yeah, sure. And I was with him every day after that.
Wow.
For 4 year.
Wow.
Every day. The teaching just went out the window. We just hit it off so well. He just, threw that idea out the window because we could communicate really, really well. And from that point on, we just did everything together. Writing, the songwriting would just be him and me, and I was like his musical translator.
So would he kind of suggest to you what he wanted? Would he describe it in the form of notes or sounds or...
He would sing it.
Sing it?
Sing the part, and then he would describe the sounds, what he heard. And what's interesting, and that's kind of a typical way to work under those conditions.
Yeah.
But our communication was so good, it was so kind of unusual, because after a couple of weeks of this, all day long, messing around,
yeah,
we got to this point where he would just say, I need a sound that makes me do this, and he would do a dance move. And I would just know immediately what it was, and I'd just make it. So we didn't hardly have to talk from that point on about, a bunch of adjectives about sounds anymore. He'd just do a dance move, and I just would know immediately that that's what he needed. And so we operated on that level. It was pretty interesting.
Would this be a percussion type sound, or not necessarily so? It could be anything.
No, not percussion. It could be bass, keys, because we're focused on a specific part of the song. And I have a, what I hear for that is a sound that makes me do this, and he would just do a dance move.
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
So he was like a theater director then. I want something that moves me this way.
Yeah.
Okay.
And and his dancing is so amazing.
Yeah.
That it was so clear what he wanted, just through the dance move. We just had this interesting way of communicating. So we did everything with the Synclavier. He sang into the Synclavier, At his house, we did a lot of percussion stuff by recording hand claps and various things in his bathroom. Because it had, a tile and stuff that had a really cool sound.
Yeah.
One time he had me go and investigate literally every drum machine on the market.
Wow.
Because he was searching for a hand clap. A hand clap. Because for him, hand claps really had to be just the right thing because it emphasized the beat a certain way. So I literally brought in every drum machine ever made up to that point and took all the hand claps from them, put them together, and we auditioned because I knew what he wanted. And it ended up we didn't want any of them. None of them worked. Wow. So he just went into his bathroom and did it himself with the mic, and we just recorded it into the Synclavier, and it ended up on the Bad album. It was killer, really punchy, and wasn't typical kind of like snaps. It was really a bang, which he really likes. So it was always fun.
So is that why he recorded his own heartbeat for Smooth Criminal? So hold on, I'm going to bring up a picture that you have. I should still be able to see you. So this is Chris, young Chris. Hold on, let me just make sure I have you in the frame as well. Where are you? There we are. One second. Okay, I'm going to put Chris in the picture set. So here's young Chris with his Synclavier II. He still looks as young as ever. This is the picture, though, that I was trying to refer to with Michael Jackson recording his heartbeat. And this is where it ended up being on Smooth Criminal. So I'm going to play a bit of the video with his heartbeat. So that was where his heartbeat ended up being on Smooth Criminal. Chris, I was wondering if you could give us some idea as to what the process was like getting his heartbeat recorded into the Synclavier.
Yeah. This was a long time ago, but I really think that whole thing was my idea, because we're always looking for different ways to make beats with different sounds, because Michael's key instruction to me up and when I was working with him is he wanted me to make him unusual sounds. So I said, that's just exactly what I like doing.
Yeah.
So that's all I did all day at his house. I just made sounds. I'd go out and sample things in the environment, come back, and record things in the studio, and then but sounds need to be put in some kind of context before you can kind of really grasp what to use them for. So I would put together some of these sounds into grooves and various things like that, and put it on a cassette tape. Back then, we were still using cassette tapes.
Yeah.
And just put it under the door of his bedroom, and he'd listen to it, and then he'd call me up at home and tell me what he liked, and so on and so forth. In the case of the heartbeat, I was thinking kind of like a kick drum, but using his heartbeat, because it's him.
Yeah.
And he thought that was a really cool idea. So since money is no object, he got this specialist from San Francisco with all the gear and everything that does all kinds of, heart testing and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And flew him down to the studio in L.A. with all his gear. And the picture shows, that how he hooked all this stuff up to Michael, and we recorded his heartbeat. We recorded it into the Synclavier.
Wow.
And then I took it and made it into an actual piece, an actual segment of sequence. But as it turned out, the recording was not what I expected it to be. We always expect a beat to be kind of like boom, 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 this. But it really was kind of a slush, 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 slush sound.
Oh, of course,
didn't have
yeah.
any real impact to it at all. And I thought, So I don't remember how I did this. But anyway, I mixed in another sound. It was either with another recording of a heartbeat or it was with a kick drum. I don't remember. but it was very specific to match that slush sound, so it became a composite sound, so it had some punch to it. And then I put it together as a sequence, and then that was used.
So the sequence was used throughout the song, was it? Not just at the introduction? Do you remember?
The idea was that it was to go through the whole thing, but I don't think it did. It was just the intro.
The introduction, which was very effective.
And since it's Michael's heartbeat, everybody's like, ooh, you know.
Yeah. I have a couple of questions already about the heartbeat. Bill Lynch from Doylestown, Pennsylvania, Bill said, did he try to get his heartbeat at a certain tempo?
No, I think he was all hyped up as it is, so it was fine the way it was. Anyway, by putting it into the Synclavier, you know, I could put it in at any speed, so it didn't really matter.
Sam from Sydney, Australia, he wanted to know about upgrades to the Synclavier. How often did you get upgrades, and was it very different from version to version?
Yeah, they were pretty significant versions, all of them. I made some gigantic jumps from my original machine, which was just basically an FM synthesizer, to a full-blown, you know, Synclavier.
Yes.
That had the big 88 keys, you know, the big keyboard, and the tower was the size of a huge refrigerator.
Wow.
You know, that housed everything.
Yeah.
And so I remember at that time when I started working for Michael, I started making a lot of money. So I just put all of it and just upgraded it and kept upgrading it as things came out. So there was a massive upgrade right away.
Yeah.
And it was so expensive. I mean, back then, the Synclavier RAM for 1 megabyte
Yeah.
was $4,000.
Sheesh.
And at that time, the max was 32. Eventually, it went up to 96. You can imagine 32 times 4,000 just in memory. So it was very, very expensive. And voices, FM voices, sampled voices, sequencing memory, multiple outputs. Michael's machine had 32 multi-channel outputs. So plus the direct-to-disc recording. So it was a massive, expensive machine. It was $500,000 at least, maybe more. It depends. But it sounded amazing. Still sounds better than anything else that's out there, even today, the sound.
Gotcha. So we have another pic. Actually, no, this is a video of the introduction to the Bad video. And the introduction part. So the Bad video was directed by Martin Scorsese. And I have a question for you about it, but let's watch the video first. Oh, the reason why I captured this sequence is because Chris had a lot to do with that orchestral stab horn section bit where we had a monochrome footage that turned into color, and Michael Jackson and his gang jumps into frame. Chris, if you could humor us by letting us know a bit about how you constructed that orchestral hit horn section bit, please.
Well, yeah. Originally, when Martin Scorsese came in on it, he was going to go record that video in New York. And all of a sudden, they said, I'm going along with him, because I was with him on all the time. Whenever he had an idea, I'm the guy that has to sit there with him. But at the last minute, they said, no, you don't have to go, because I was needed in the studio with Bruce. I mean, they needed to clone me about 3 times so I could get in all these places at once. It was pretty ridiculous.
Yeah.
But he came back with the footage, and the bad was pretty much just me and Michael in the studio recording that, originally.
Yeah.
And so Jerry Hay did the horns for that during the song.
I see.
But then they realized, after all that had been recorded and done, that there was no intro. And so they said, Chris, do something, that section where they all come dancing and fall in. So what I did is I just used the Synclavier and sampled individual horn parts from what was on the song in other parts, and then completely reconstructed a whole horn section there into that hit, bomb, 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 and they loved that. So, and I did that at my house, not at Michael's studio. I did it at my studio on my Synclavier. So it worked perfectly.
That's wonderful. So I have more pictures with more questions. So that's Michael Jackson. Here's you guys with Quincy Jones. And of course, the question I have is, how was it like to translate musical ideas in a room full of producers? Because I'm assuming Quincy wasn't so much technically knowledgeable.
Well, there was a team there. And that team already had a proven track record with Thriller, years earlier. Mm-hmm. That was with Bruce and Quincy and Michael. And then I was the new guy that was there all the time with them. And Craig Johnson was the second engineer. And that was who the team was for a year, every day recording in the studio. Mm-hmm. Now, we had different studio musicians, various ones come in and try different things. But pretty much 80% of the album was Synclavier. Michael just loved the Synclavier. He loved the sound of it, the punch of it. There wasn't really a lot of producers. If Quincy was not there for some reason, Bruce had so much experience, working on with Michael, that he would kind of act as a producer, but it was more like, well, these are the things we have to do today.
Got it.
We have to do some strings, and we have to do this, and we have to do that. And so we always, had an agenda that we were doing. But Quincy was the producer, but he understood technology, not necessarily that he could do it himself, but he'd worked with so many people with so many instruments and things that he knew what could be done. That's kind of his thing with musicians. He knows how to put different musicians together and their different skills together to get a sound. So there really wasn't a lot of producers. And they listened to me when I thought something needed to be done, or if I saw a train wreck coming, especially in the beginning, because Synclavier was new to everybody. So I was the new guy, so I kind of kept my mouth shut and did the best I can. But as time went on and we got more friendly and they understood my skills and understood the Synclavier more than if I saw a train wreck coming or had some idea that I thought that was coming from new technology that they wouldn't have thought of, I would present it. Oh, you could do this or this or this too. Just to give them the ideas that they could pick from. So we had a really good working relationship this way. And it was really fun because unlike 99% of the music projects that are done that always have a budget limitation and time limitation, Michael had none of that.
That's nice.
Yeah, I mean, when he got an idea, it was really fixed in his mind. Money was no object to get it done, ever. So we didn't have any monetary restrictions and really no time restrictions. Although after a year, the record company says, we have to get this album done. It took a year and we're still, goofing around in the studio. So, it was kind of a creative, amazing situation when you don't have those kind of restrictions.
Mm-hmm. So we have a friend of yours, I think, Bruce Phoenix, and he said, how is Bruce? Is he still on the East Coast?
Sweden?
I guess so, yeah. I think you mentioned Bruce was a producer as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
He would do different things. Mm-hmm. Of course, he lived out near my house in L.A. I was living in an area called Westlake, and he was in kind of Newberry Park I forgot now. but a little bit further out than me, and we both would drive in separately every day into the studio. But eventually, after the albums were done and Dangerous was done, I kind of lost track of communicating with Bruce. But I think he moved to the East Coast. I think Florida.
Wow.
I think, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's producing different people and stuff.
So I have something coming in from Sydney, Australia. Sam, he says, I remember that Michael Jackson toured Australia in 1987, and this was a huge thing for our country. Was the wardrobe that he had you wear uncomfortable? Did you have any input in it?
That's an interesting question. We didn't really have any say in it. Michael worked with a famous designer at the time, and Michael had his own designer, Michael Bush. But Michael had a concept of what he wanted the band to look like. And so while we were rehearsing, those guys came out and looked at each one of us and how we were performed and stuff and how we looked. And based on that, he would design clothes specifically for us. So even though we didn't really have anything to say about it, they were still kind of tailored to our personality,
Right.
Our body types and so on and so forth. But I remember the first night of the first tour in Japan, the clothes were a nightmare because they were not designed for performance. So they had all these things hanging off them and bulky and stuff, and you couldn't even play. Like one of my outfits had all these looked like giant fish hooks that dangled down instead of like fringe. They were like metal hooks,
Yes.
and they would catch on my keys and stuff when I'm playing and stuff. It's just so immediately Michael Bush had to modify literally everybody's, get rid of all that stuff so that we could actually play in those outfits. And so it was very interesting. Like Michael's costume changes took way too long. So he had to strip it all down, so that he could make these changes much quicker. And one of my outfits, it took 3 people about 2 hours to get me into it. And after Michael got done with it, I could do it by myself in about 40 minutes.
Oh, gee.
So, these clothes definitely had to be modified. Yeah. But after that, it was okay.
So speaking of cumbersome clothing, I think I have a picture of you. Let's see, where is it? Here we are. Here, speaking of cumbersome clothing, here is cumbersome equipment. And let me just get you in the picture so that you can do the commentary.
There's a big delay on my picture here, so.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, maybe I don't know, at least a minute, 2 minutes.
Oh dear. Well,
you can describe it. You can describe it now.
This is probably familiar to you. It is your 2 Synclavier setups backstage. Everything is housed in road cases.
Oh yeah.
Yes, that one. And I see a I think I see a floppy drive. I think I see one.
There's many floppy drives, and then there's a whole lot of hard drives in flight cases.
Right.
On stage, I had 2 keyboards, Synclavier keyboards, and 2 terminals, and those were attached to everything that you see there. That was a huge setup, and that was near the beginning of the tour. Later on, all that equipment was housed in an air-conditioned room to keep them clean.
How do you maintain them during the show and throughout the tour?
I stole the engineer, the top engineer from New England Digital.
Oh, okay. So
to go on tour with us. So that's how I did it.
So you had to keep an eagle eye on everything.
No, I never saw the machines until I walked out on stage. I never even saw or at sound check. I had no control. I didn't even see them. So it had to be under other people's control that knew what they were doing. So I had to get literally the top engineer, Mitch McCoulier, to go on the tour. That was a political interesting thing because he was their top guy, and and we didn't want to create bad waves with the company because we used the Synclaviers so heavily and relying on them. Yeah. And but it worked out. It worked out. So I was playing 2 Synclaviers on stage, and then we had an entire second Synclavier kind of as a standby.
Yeah.
It literally could just be unplugged and plugged in. It was like ready to go. You just switch some cables, so it could be going immediately if something happened. And then I had one in my dressing room, not my dressing room, my hotel room. The crew would set it up. Sometimes I'd have a separate room, or I'd have an adjoining room, and so they'd take out all the furniture, and it would become a studio.
Wow. With
recording equipment and everything. So if Michael wanted to write some songs, we'd just come together and go in there and do it. Although on the tour he was always too busy, so it was just my studio to do my things with.
So there were two other questions I had for you about your stage setup. First, of course, is how did the 2 Synclaviers work in conjunction with each other and for your purpose? They had different roles, didn't they?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. One was real time and one was not real time, basically. And I would trigger both of them with a SynthAxe, which was the most advanced guitar controller at the time. And I had 2 terminals there, to call ups, downs, and various things between the 2. Mm-hmm. And they had lots of outputs that, had to go to the house and to the sound mixer or the monitor mixer and so on and so forth. And I had a really good monitoring system for myself. Mm-hmm. So it was really hi-fi. Mm-hmm. Where other guys had, racks and racks of all kinds of different normal synthesizers, I just had 2 Synclaviers. And a SynthAxe. Actually, it was quite simple in that regard, but yet it was, monstrously complex.
I read somewhere that when there were pyrotechnics going on, if it was too explosive, it would crash a Synclavier. Is that true?
Yeah, actually, that was a weird phenomenon. And it would do it in Thriller. Oh. Because that's when we had the giant, pyro. We had Kiss's pyro guys. So serious pyro stuff. And all the percussion and stuff that it starts out with, that was a sequence taken right from the album, played back on the Synclavier. And occasionally, it would start out boom, and then it would go down, down, and sometimes it would just freeze the machine.
Oh boy!
It would just crash. It would just freeze. So I had to reboot it, and we immediately, my techs and me, got on the case to figure out what's causing this, and we roped off the whole area around the stage where the Synclaviers are, so nobody could get around there to cause any problems. Already my SynthAxe had been modified by, with serious insulation because RF would cause it to trigger by itself.
Oh, dear.
I'd be standing there and it'd go blang, and everybody'd look at me like, what are you doing? I'm like, I didn't do anything. So, and at sound checks, it wouldn't do it. It would do it only, the performances, and everybody had cell phones and stuff like this. So we had to make a radio-free zone around the Synclavier stuff so that wouldn't happen. And it was isolated, with ferrite beads, and it was insulated with copper foil inside the SynthAxe to block all the RF. Wow. And it pretty much handled it. But as far as the Thriller thing, it kept happening. And we just couldn't figure out what the hell was going on with it, At first we thought that maybe the shock would shake the machine and the cards were loose or something, and it would cause it to crash. He tore everything apart and put it back, cleaning everything, and made no difference. But to make a long story short, fairly soon, we found out that it was an electromagnetic pulse from the explosion. Wow. And So we had to have the pyro guys tone it down.
Yeah.
You know, so bring the explosion down a little bit. Never, when they bring it down, never crashed. And they were always trying to get the most explosion. You know, how far can we go? We'd put a little bit more, and then it would go past this threshold, it'd crash the Synclavier every time. Total predictable. So that's what it was. It was an electronic magnetic pulse from the explosions. The explosions were big.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
And the Synclavier, you know, it's in a tower the size of a refrigerator, so there's lots of circuits in there, you know, that can act as antennas, and anything, you know, any kind of electro anomaly that could go by a circuit and just changes a 1 to a 0, boom, it goes down. And it got to the point where everybody would look at me after the explosion to see, is it working? Is it working? Because otherwise they have to do something else to make up for it while I reboot, you know. And I would nod or not nod, you know.
How long did it take to reboot the Synclavier?
Not too long.
Oh, okay.
Not, you know, way faster than a Mac computer.
Oh, no.
But it seemed like it took forever when you're on stage. You know, it's like, you know, hurry up, you know. But not so much. But the problem is the sequence is down, so the sequences can't be locked up anymore to the song because we're already playing. So I'd have to play it. I'd have to play it by hand. It's a surprise.
That was not fun.
Yeah, it was never a dull moment. It's not like walking out and just jamming on your guitar on stage, you know. I had a million things I had to watch all at once, you know, to make sure things were happening. But, you know, that's what's called the bleeding edge.
So I can only assume that with each song you have certain things locked up to when things have to happen. And so you're literally playing a sequence of the song. As we know it as being now a sequence. And so it wasn't for the entire show, was it? It was just per song.
Yeah, dependent on the song.
Okay. Oh, that's good.
Yep. And because there was more Michael wanted the songs to sound like the album. That's his concept. Some people like to change up the music in a live performance, you know. Yeah. But Michael didn't like that. He said that people buy the album, that's what they want to hear, is those songs. So the sounds and the performances, they had to be exactly the same. And that rubbed a few musicians wrong in the beginning. You know, they weren't used to that. They thought, you know, they're happening, you know, we can do it. It'll sound like that. It'll sound good. Yeah, it sounds good, but it's not what Michael wants. He wants it to sound like that, you know. So a lot of stuff had to play out of the Synclavier because there was lots of tracks on the album. We couldn't play it all live, even with the big band that we had. You know, some of it. Again, it depends on the song, but you know, there's a lot of parts going on. Yeah. So generally, I would send a click to our drummer. Oh. You know, it wasn't a click; it was actually a cowbell or something. I can't remember, or some kind of industrial percussion. And you would hear it here, you know, and and everything would be fine.
Oof. More pictures to show. I've got one picture of Chris playing. Here's probably the one that I've been passing around that most people have seen, because I think this one was included in the Keyboard Magazine article on Michael Jackson's Bad Tour. That's Chris. That's one of you, the black and white. Well, at least the one I have is black and white. Of you with your SynthAxe in front of the two claviers.
Yeah, I think that was it. Madison Square Garden soundcheck.
Yes, so it seems here. And then here's another one of you with your SynthAxe. Don't know if you can see it, Chris, but it's a colored one. It's red.
Yeah, that one is, I think that was taken in Rome.
Rome? Okay.
Yeah, in a live show. Yeah.
What was your most hair-raising experience playing the SynthAxe on stage with the Synclavier?
Every night? I don't know. Because it was, every time it was different, something was different. We never had any major catastrophes, because we thought ahead for everything, and money wasn't a problem. So we never had any real catastrophes. There was one time we finished a song, and we were getting ready to do the encore, and for some reason, the Synclavier that starts the song just went off. And my sound tech, from the company, he was just freaking out, because that's never happened before. He was just freaking out. And I said, look, calm down, and we'll just methodically go through and check, Yeah. And meanwhile, the venue's all black and everybody's got their lighters, and Michael's up there. He's asking me, how long is it going to take? I said, I don't know, but, we'll get it. So he's out there, getting the audience going. And I think it's actually on tape somewhere, on a video this, because he's going, he's saying stuff and the audience would repeat.
Yeah.
Back and forth,
yes.
Like this in the dark. And I got it running. Somebody went through the zone of the Synclavier zone that shouldn't have been and kicked out a cable.
Oh,
Idiot. So anyway, we figured it out and booted it back up. And I told Michael. So he was finishing his back and forth with the audience, and then they were repeating exactly what he was saying, right?
Yeah.
Different words, and then he said my name.
Oh.
He says, Chris! And all the audiences went, Chris! And Michael looked at me, we both cracked up and went, oh my God. And then it was bad, the song bad, and we went into the encore. But we just freaked out because they said my name. They didn't know what they were saying. They just were repeating. And Michael and I are looking at each other, busting up laughing. Anyway, every night was interesting.
How did you find the SynthAxe then, playing it or using it as a tool to get what you needed to do done?
Well, at the beginning of the Bad Tour, when we were just got the word, that we're putting it together, I realized, Michael wanted me to play, but I'm not a keyboard player. Mm-hmm. Plus, we have 2 keyboard players, so I just assumed I'm playing guitar. So, and that's what Michael said, and the Synclavier. And but as it turned out, the amount of time we had to get it together and the complexity of how things came out, there was just no way that we had time to set up all the guitar rig and have me playing guitar and Synclavier at the same time. So it was my choice. Yeah. I ditched the whole guitar. We had 2 other guitar players anyway. It wasn't necessary, so I could focus totally. And right away I knew in order to play the Synclavier, I needed a guitar controller. And the only one that actually worked at the time was the SynthAxe.
Right.
Because there wasn't any glitching, because the way it worked, when the strings touched the fret, it would trick. It wasn't pitch to voltage. It was like a keyboard, so it was much more accurate. So I had to learn how to play that thing and do all this other stuff in a very short time.
So the SynthAxe was a MIDI controller, wasn't it? It was using MIDI. Right.
Yep. And people like Alan Holdsworth was using it, And I was using the Synclavier digital guitar, but it wasn't accurate enough to do what needed to be done. I had it, but it wasn't. It had to be, accurate.
So
when you hit a note, it has to play that note.
So there were various playing surfaces on the SynthAxe, wasn't it? That you had the strings on the neck as well as what looked like keys, but they were all black.
Yeah, there was trigger strings that you could pick with your pick that were separate from the neck strings. Got it. In fact, the neck was crooked. It was like that. Oh. because they were totally independent, which was kind of weird because you usually can feel, the string on a guitar. When you pick it, you feel a vibration with your other hand. But with the SynthAxe, they're completely separated. So it was kind of strange. But so you could pick it like a guitar, or you could put it in a different mode where you could just tap it, and it had keys that you could play with your hand and get different voicings, which was, so all these were very important, ways to trigger it.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if I wanted to play strings, strumming in a guitar method is not good because you're strumming.
Yeah.
Da, 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 da. Strings hit it all at once.
Mm.
they don't go da, 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 da. So that's when the keys are good to have, and tapping, I like tapping, and that's my main way of playing now with the guitar synthesizers I have now is two-handed tapping mostly. I don't even have any strings for picking on my current controller.
I think I have a picture of it. 1 second. That's the one, isn't it? That's the one you used on the cover we did of Thriller as well. Or at least
Zetar is what I'm using now. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So those are all velocity and pressure sensitive keys on there, like a keyboard. And I just play it in a tapping mode, either with just my right hand or both hands. And there's a lot of pads on the body itself that I can play too. They can be switches, they can be drums, they can be chords, whatever. I can program them in real time. Just put them there and play them. I wish I had the Zetar back then, but it didn't exist back then.
Yeah. So I do have some questions from the viewers. I have not wanted to pull them in yet because you were telling us such interesting stories. I thought I'll hold off for for a while. So Bruce Phoenix wanted to know whether you played the bass line in Leave Me Alone on the Synclavier.
Leave Me Alone, I didn't play on this one.
That's your answer, Bruce.
So I can't answer that question. It was a lot of Synclavier, but I don't know who played what on that song.
Sam, Sydney, Australia, did Michael Jackson play any other instruments with you besides his voice?
Well, sometimes he played the keyboard. He played percussion stuff because he had a really good groove. But other than that, no, he just would sing the parts. In fact, way before the Synclavier, that's how he would communicate. He would literally sing all the parts, bass parts, keyboard parts, solo parts, percussion parts, like, Bobby McFerrin type things.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's ever really seen him do it. I have, and it's amazing. But when we got the Synclavier, then, he could get his ideas out this way. But he would just sing them to me for the melodies and things. And sometimes he would just, bash on the keyboard for the rhythms. I mean, he's very good. He could play drums. I've heard him play drums. He's got a really good rhythm. But one time, I asked him, because I don't know how this conversation came up, but we were in the studio, his studio at his house, and I don't know if I asked him about maybe musical styles or something, if he liked rock, and he said, yeah, and Led Zeppelin and stuff, And we got out, some Led Zeppelin, and he started playing it, and he started doing air guitar.
Oh, wow.
To like the Immigrant Song. Oh. It was killer. He was doing it super good. I said, man, you should just have a guitar in your hand and go out on stage and do that. People would just flip. And he goes, nah, I can't do that. I said, no, man, he was seriously like he was really playing it, man, like a seasoned player. Wow. All the moves. I said, people would just flip if you just walked out with a guitar in your hand like that and sang. But, yeah, it was fun. But mostly, no. He would just sit at the piano bench in front of the Synclavier with me and sing the parts mostly, and I would play them in. So
this question, I think, is in reference to your Was it a... Now, what's the... Oh, sorry. This one. What is the current guitar that you use called again?
The synth controller?
The current one,
Or my guitar?
Yes, your guitar. No,
I'm
your
playing
your synth controller, your synth guitar.
Synth controller is a Z-tar. It's called Z-tar.
That's right.
It's
I
made by
remember
Star
now.
Labs in San Diego. Good,
They're
nice
the ones
product.
who make the synth violins as well, MIDI controller violins as string instruments as well, isn't it?
No.
They don't. Only
No.
guitars.
Yep.
Oh, okay. So this
He
question.
makes, yeah.
Go on, please.
He makes some, different kinds of keyboard matrix controllers that are really abstract for really, avant-garde type composers. But basically, his main thing is guitar controllers, and he makes different variations of the Z-tar. He does make. They're all custom made.
Oh.
He has no real set thing. So whoever wants one can just say, I need this and this kind of controller and these kind of triggers and these kind of pads and blah, blah, blah. And he puts it all together.
So Mike Brent from Eugene, Oregon says, I'm guessing a Chapman stick is quite different then.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because a Chapman stick is not a synth controller. It's a string instrument. The Z-tar it doesn't have any strings. Well, some of the new ones do have some trigger strings, but I don't use them. My learning curve with the Z-tar has been quite a long road from the beginnings, and he didn't have string triggers at the time.
Okay.
So I just kind of learned by tapping, and now I'm doing it so well, and I never thought string triggers worked very well anyway. Maybe his new ones work fine, but I have no need for them. Because tapping is cool.
So you've developed your own style then, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bill Lynch from Pennsylvania, he wants to know if you're familiar with the Dramata. Whoops. How did that get in there? I wanted this one. Dramata.
I'm familiar with it, but I've never played one. Having said that, probably I think based on how most of these controllers work for guitar, I think the Z-tar is the best that's out there. Again, there's no strings, so a guitar player just picking it up probably would just go, whoa, how do I even do anything with this? So it's probably an instant turnoff. But with a little bit of practice and not all that much, all of a sudden, wow, you can do all kinds of stuff. But there's no glitching, or anything like this. It's just like playing a keyboard, only instead of big keys, they're just like little teeny keys, And my Z-tar, I have 3 of them, including a double neck, but all of them I ordered it without frets, because I don't need frets. I can feel where the notes are very easily, and frets just slow me down. As you move up and down, I don't need that friction, so I just don't have them. People that are probably locked into guitar, they would feel more comfortable having frets, but they serve no function other than to kind of guide the player where he is. But I don't need them because I can feel where it is from the keys. So you can play really, really, really fast.
Somewhat similar to the Haken Continuum is to the keyboard player, because it hasn't got the discrete, the delineation from key to key. It's just one flat surface, and the bumps which represent where the keys might be, and you could kind of go zoop.
Yeah, kind of like that. The Z-tar is more discrete than the Continuum. Continuum is a really cool instrument, I think, personally. But again, it's more for a person used to playing keys. The Z-tar is more designed for a person used to playing a guitar, even though it's quite a bit different.
Gotcha. So, not long after working with Michael Jackson, you moved to Japan, didn't you? And you started a whole different life, somewhat. At least your life in Japan has seen you create new businesses in audio production and the such.
Yeah, I kind of fell in love with Japan when I performed in Japan with Michael in the beginning of the Bad Tour. And then I started producing artists here in Japan because I was kind of well known from playing with Michael. And at first it was either I was still actually playing with Michael on a break, but mostly just after, when I finished the tour, I started going to Japan all the time. And people did their homework in Japan. You know, they really are fans of Michael. I mean, they just severely do their research, investigations, and who does what. My name always came up, even though I was kind of hidden. I was kind of Michael's secret weapon. Yeah. But they found out that I was the guy behind the scenes a lot and was responsible for the overall sound, stylistic sound, because of the sound design using the Synclavier of the Bad album. So they wanted me to, because that was the thing back then, you know, that style. So they wanted me to produce other Japanese artists in that kind of vein. So I started that way. Yeah. And then I ended up just doing more and more things, like working with game companies and virtual technologies and so on and so forth, and 3D sound productions and all kinds of advanced stuff. So it's cool. So I was living in Japan about 6 months a year for many, many, many years, going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, 6 months here and 6 months there. And then 11 years ago, I moved here permanently. So I don't live in Tokyo. I live about a 2.5 hour car drive west of Tokyo in the mountains on a peninsula in a resort town in the mountains in the forest overlooking Mount Fuji and the ocean. Nice. So my house is here, and I have a great view, and my offices are here, and my studio is here, so it's really nice.
That's wonderful.
Nice place to create. Yeah. No people. It's quiet.
No people.
I just wake up, and there's just birds.
You sold me on the no people. And birds and Mount Fuji.
Yeah.
I do have...
Yeah, and so since I've been here, I've done a lot of work. I put out about maybe 16 or 17 solo albums.
Wow.
Yeah, and I'm in the middle of a new project now that's more high-powered dance EDM stuff and almost heavy metal EDM fused together. Wow. I just feel right now, with everybody locked down and everybody trying to... the situations are forcing people to kind of be inactive when they should be more active.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to create music that kind of, you know, wakes people up energetically, you know, it just gives them some...
Yeah, that's good.
And plus, I've been doing a lot of kind of spacey cosmic music for a while. And so I've been, at the same time, getting the urge to do some really heavy driving stuff. So this is what I'm doing now. And I'm performing. But the COVID-19 kind of shut that down temporarily. But, you know, the gigs are still there. We'll just see if they can materialize. My very first concert with this new project is in Okinawa in November, but we'll see if we can still do it or not.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I'm going to be doing it, doing live performances on live streaming, just like you did earlier. So that'll be online soon.
I have got a question here before I show more pictures of Chris and some of his gear. Sam, Sydney, Australia, wants to know, what well-known games have you worked on?
The games I worked on were quite old, a long time ago with Nintendo and Sega. Nothing new that
do you remember the names of those Nintendo and Sega games? Some of these people here are not that young as they look in the photos.
I'd have to go back on my resume and look on my website. I don't remember the names. They were kind of cosmic. They were popular at the time, but
no worries. So I've got some photos to show of Chris still. Here's him in one of his performances, I think that you mentioned, Chris. And a more recent one, I believe, where you used, we were talking about this a few days ago, you have 3 iPads.
Yes.
And here
before the pandemic, I went to Okinawa and did kind of a mini live concert using just 3 iPads, which is something I wanted to do for a long time. And it was really fun. It was really cool. It worked great. It was a really EDM dance thing. And I was more like a DJ, but I was actually playing them and performing them, not just hitting buttons, but actually playing melodies and solos and grooves and stuff along with, loops and all kinds of stuff. It was lots of fun.
So which iPad did you use to play melodies? Is that the one on the extreme left? I can't quite tell.
The iPad Pro, the bigger one in the middle.
Oh, that one for melodies?
Mm-hmm. I would do solos and stuff there. And that's where the majority of the synthesizers were, because that's the most powerful iPad. The other are iPad Airs.
Oh, okay.
And one was a mixer that I made. I programmed in Lemur in order to be able to control different tracks while I'm on the other iPad in a synthesizer doing something. In other words, I need to do 2 things at once. So I needed to actually make a mixer that I could solo, mute, change volumes, blah, 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 of the whole thing at the same time that I'm performing. So I made a mixer, and that was running on one iPad. And then I had another iPad that was running a specific synthesizer that I kind of like called TC11. It has a really neat interface for all your fingers, and it looks really cool. And it's quite abstract, but it's really cool. So I dedicated an iPad just for that, just to mess around with. But the majority of the sounds, the actual sounds and stuff, were coming from the iPad Pro. It's a very fast machine. So I had no problem with running lots of synthesizers and lots of effects. And
that's wonderful. So we have 2 questions from, oh dear, I forgot his name because it's not obvious in his, I think it was Gary from Frederick, Maryland. That's right. He wants to know whether your live stream is on your YouTube page.
If I I'm sorry.
Oh, whether your live stream that you mentioned that you were about to embark on, or you started already, your live streams, is that on your YouTube page?
It'll probably be up and running in probably within 2 weeks.
2 weeks? Whereabouts will we be able to...
I'm building a video studio downstairs.
Yeah. Where will we be able to watch these when the time comes?
Probably the easiest would be to go to the website Transformation Tools.
Transformation Tools,
Yeah, and
I'll just type
if you
this
type
out.
my name next to that, it'll come up.
So everybody type Transformation Tools as you see on the screen right now, and type Chris's name. I'll do that for you.
Yep. And a majority, don't get afraid because a majority of it is in Japanese, but there's English translations there for most of it. And that's where that's where I sell my CDs, and I've written books, and books are available there. And also schedules of performances and various things are also scheduled there. And of course, the live stream information will be available there. We call the stream Transformation Tools Network.
I'll put that in as well in case. Transformation Tools Network.
Yeah, TTN. And that's going to be numerous things, live performances and lectures and workshops and interviews, kind of like what we're doing right here. So we'll be doing lots of different things with that. It's a professional studio, so it's taken a while to set up. We have a big green screen, so we can do all kinds of cool background effects, for the live shows and various things. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to seeing it, so let me know when it's going.
Yeah, sure. Of course.
Let's see
We'll make a big announcement.
Sorry, Chris?
We'll make a big announcement.
Wonderful. I'm just going to scroll down the comments to see if there are any more questions, because we don't want to keep you too long. Anyone else have questions for Chris about his work, about the Synclavier or his synth guitar, the Zeta, which is using currently, or the previous one, his SynthAxe? or his iPads or his work? Anybody else? Bearing in mind there's a latency, so by the time they get my questions.
In January, depending on the current state of the pandemic, but in January in Paris, I'll be doing a couple of interesting things. I'm going to be doing a talk for the Michael Jackson fans in Europe.
Nice. Very good.
I'm just going to be talking about, all my experiences and stuff for all the MJ fans. I've never really done this, before. But it should be a lot of fun because I have a different view because I've worked with Michael on the creative side.
Yeah.
It's not just celebrity stuff. So people can actually get information of how we actually created the music and the thought processes and the technologies involved and various things like this.
Yeah.
And of course, just the interesting on the road stories. There's millions of them.
Yeah.
So I'll be sharing lots of things like that and pictures and stuff. And then a couple days later at the Abbey Road Institute in Paris, which is a recording school, I'm doing a master class for synthesis, talking about starting with the Synclavier productions and up to today and how that's changed and what's different, and also 3D sound stuff, 3D sound productions, because I've done lots of that.
Yeah.
So that should be fun. So anybody that's in Paris in January, they should check this out.
I'd love to go. We'll see what happens by January. But someone did suggested you should write a book. Oh, it's Gary again from Frederick, Maryland, who said you should write a book. Not a creepy tell-all, but just full of your musical experiences working with Michael.
I kind of did. It's posted as a four part column.
Oh, the one you directed me to, yes.
It's kind of like a mini book, but it's a lot. And there's a lot more, but it kind of gives the drift because I never really gave much talks about my work with Michael. I just wanted the music to do the talking, and that's what Michael wanted. But these days, since Michael's passed, and he still has amazing fans. People that are really interested in his music and always have been, and there's no more new music from him.
Yeah.
And so I think now is the time to maybe go in the direction of the processes behind the scenes of the creative processes, and because I have a very unique viewpoint of this on the Bad tour behind the scenes and how we did all of this and my working directly with Michael. So it's a different viewpoint. And because of this, a good friend of mine kind of talked me into doing these 4 columns. He's the owner of Headphone Guru, which is a audiophile website for all things headphones.
Yeah.
And for a year, I was writing a monthly column. Not reviews. I could write anything about anything, which was kind of cool.
Yeah, very nice.
That's when I wrote this 4-part thing. So if you go to headphone.guru, it's there, and it's in 3 different languages. It's in English and Japanese and Spanish with pictures and everything. It's 4 parts, so it's quite lengthy.
I'll just type this out. Headphone.guru. Anybody
and
interested?
Go to columns and you'll find it. Yeah.
Headphone.guru. In case you need some assistance with your English, this is how you spell headphone.guru.
I think the article is called Music Synclavier of Michael Jackson or something like this.
Okay.
Parts 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Gotcha. If anyone's interested, I do have the link, so I will type it in. You just ask me to our views. So I did have a question about Michael Jackson's musical literacy. Did he know how to read and write music? Or did he mainly communicate his musical needs through singing it or using body percussion, that sort of stuff?
Yeah, the latter.
Oh, okay.
I have no idea if he could read music or anything like this. I highly doubt it because I've never saw it, and I was with him every day for years.
Wow.
We always communicated with him just singing the parts. But one thing about Michael, even though technically he didn't know what to do, with technology, but he was smart. He would say, well, if you could do this with that, and you can do this with that, if you put those together, can you get this? And he would present me with these kinds of challenges all the time. And since my job is not to say no, I don't get paid to negative comments. Yeah, I would figure out how to do it. So we were doing things that Synclavier was never designed to do. We were really pushing the limits. But it was fun that way. So I like that. It was challenging. I would just, let me think a minute. Yeah, we can do that. Might take me some time to do it, but I was always able to do it. Sometimes I could do it really quick.
Yeah.
But he would ask like this. And he had a very clear vision of sounds in his head. They weren't fuzzy. He had very clear. Early on, when I just first started working with him, we were working on a song, and he said something, that we need strings here. And it should sound sort of like an ARP string machine, that kind of sound. And he said maybe I should just go to our warehouse and just get mine, because he had tons of gear.
Yeah.
Himself. And I said, but I can get, that sound on the Synclavier, I can get a better string sound, and then I realized very quickly, no, he didn't want those sounds. He wanted the ARP specific sound. And when we put it on there, it was perfect. So at that point, I never, second guessed him again, because he had a very clear vision. So it was nice working with him like this. But he was always into all kinds of music. In the studio, he had all these shelves of actual LPs, and they were all like world music, African music, Indonesian music, all kinds of stuff. So he liked all kinds of stuff. So his ears were open to all kinds of things.
They say how when you work with someone for a long time or at close distance, you rub off on each other. Do you think any of Michael's methods rubbed off on you? Or the way he heard sounds of or his vision? Yeah,
it did. Very specifically, his concept of the level of how much the music needs to move you to dance. It's like a physical, serious punch. And before I started working with him, I thought I had nailed that, fairly well, But when I started working with him, all the stuff that I previously had sounded like really weak. I was like, wow, we can't use any of that stuff. The samples are not high quality enough. None of that stuff is any good. So I just started over, and the level of the degree of the quality of the rhythm and the physical punch of the sound, and he would listen at super loud levels. I knew where his hearing damage was. I knew his whole hearing curve. It was really easy, so I could mix things the way he wanted to hear it, and it would be cool, because I knew his hearing curve. In Westlake Studios, where we did the Bad album, when he would come into the control room to listen to what we just finished or whatever, he would just go up and turn it up like full volume. It's like 25,000 watts.
Yeah.
Everybody just immediately disappeared out of the room. I mean, they just pushed to get out of the room. It was too loud. I was always wearing headphones to knock the volume down, but it was ridiculously loud. And on stage, too, the stage volume. It was like there was so much sound pressure level coming from the sides sides and stuff, you feel like you're just going to implode. So he really liked that, that power. And the Synclavier was able to do that more than any tape machine. Tape machine would saturate before it reached that kind of punch where the Synclavier wouldn't. So those kinds of things is what I kind of learned from him. And that's important. I really liked, I don't know if you listened to the Bad album, but the style of this is kind of minimal. You don't, there's air between snare and kick and stuff. So everything is really discreet and you hear it and everything is in its place. It's not just a bunch of stuff thrown in with good sounds. It's just everything fits like this and there's not a lot of things. You don't have to have a lot of things if you do it right. And the less is more if you can do like this. And so this is something I've learned. You can get a lot more bang and punch if you're looking for that kind of sound by using less. But you also have to be very careful. You can't use third and fourth generation samples and things like this. It won't work. It just won't work. And of course, at that time, we were working with machines that were super high quality. Even today, the Synclavier still sounds better than anything else that's out there. And in the studio, when we committed to tape, it was to a Mitsubishi 32-track digital recorder, which was really, really good. And the sound of it was very similar to the Synclavier. I don't know, the converters and stuff, they were very on this kind of same animals. So you didn't lose anything by transferring it. It kept the character really well. So these things I kind of learned, because before that I had limited access to that kind of high quality tools.
Yeah. Do you still have your Synclavier? Does it still work if you do?
No, I sold it.
Oh, what?
Before I moved to Japan, and I cried for 2 days and thought, man, maybe I really didn't do the right thing. I was really messed up. But, the company went out of business, and at some point, if it breaks, I won't be able to repair it anime. I could see this coming at some point.
Did you transfer any of the samples before you sold it?
Oh, I transferred everything, so I have everything. If I got another Synclavier, I could put it all back. But it was really difficult. This guy who, I don't know if he was a student or what, from MIT or something, he wanted to buy it.
Oh, wow.
And he paid me the money that was okay, and he paid cash right on the line, and I was like, He says, why do you want to sell this? And I said, I don't. It was my tech who referred him. He said, you should talk to Chris. Maybe he'll sell his machine. And but I really thought about it, and I just did it. And literally for 2 days, I was really messed up. I thought I maybe made a big mistake. Because I knew that machine inside and out. I could work on it really fast. It sounded great, but it had a limited life, So I sold it. But in retrospect, I probably did the right thing. But, entering the world of multiple synthesizers and trying to synchronize everything and, do all this stuff, it's a nightmare where I never really had to deal with that kind of stuff if it's all in one system.
Yeah.
These days, I'm doing mostly plugins.
Do you still have your SynthAxe?
No, I sold that too, because the Zetar is better. And the SynthAxe went out of business a long time ago. Even before the Michael Jackson tour was done, I think they went out of business. I had 3 of them just in case.
Wow.
But now the Zetars are very cool. Much, much better.
Talking about memories, you made me think of some of my own. Not as interesting as yours, but they were, they did make their mark on my life.
But I have one vintage synthesizer here, and that's a D550.
Oh, okay.
It's a rack mount D50
Yeah.
Roland synthesizer. It's a rack mount version.
Right.
I probably won't get rid of it because it's such a classic. But that's the only thing I have, really. I just sold my Kurzweil a few days ago. I had a Kurzweil, and it was in perfect condition, but I don't use it. I'm using Contact all the time now for a sampler. I don't use it. It sounds good, still sounds good, but I just don't use it.
Yeah, I'm kind of similar in that way. I'm using a lot of plugins. I don't use hardware synthesizers much, if at all. I mean, I'm using the poor Korg Triton as a MIDI controller.
I'm using a Push 2 and a Complete Control Native Instruments 88 keyboard, 88 key keyboard. I use the iPad a lot for controllers. And I design my own controllers sometimes for the iPad.
Yeah.
So, yeah, my plugins that I use a lot are, of course, all the stuff from Spectrasonics are good. Yuhi makes really good synthesizers. I use, all his stuff.
Yeah.
Of course, I have all the Arturia synths.
Right.
So, yeah, and there's a few other odds and ends because some of these, for example, Diva by Yuhi, man, it sounds really analog. It's really amazing. It takes a lot of CPU power, but finally, these plugins are starting to really happen. Omnisphere is great. So, yeah, plugins are okay. I've got lots of them, but lots of them I never use because they just don't hold up. They just in a track they just wimp out. They're not really very good.
That's fair enough. I'm just scrolling down to see if there are any more questions. I did have Sam from Sydney, Australia, ask how we met. I don't remember now. So
On the internet.
yeah, a long time ago. I don't know how. Yeah. On the internet, but I don't know how it took place.
I don't remember either.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
But we became aware of each other on the internet. So we contacted because we're musicians. So
And I think I was going to try and visit you in Japan many years ago, but it never happened.
No, for some reason. You're close now.
Yeah, I'm closer now. I just have to wait for a few more months and then
Yep, see what happens.
see
right?
what happens. Okay, Chris, I don't see any more questions, but we've had more people come join us online, though, which is very nice. Like, when there's silence, that people are thinking about what you've just said. That's what I've noticed with these streams. When everyone's asking a question, they're obviously not paying attention to what you're saying. No, I mean, they are, and they have questions. But when there's silence, they're contemplating, there's this deep, meaningful connection with their brains, and they go, oh, wow.
Yeah, so this was fun. Yeah, thanks for inviting me in.
Thanks, Chris. It was nice to see you again. At least we got to Skype a few times this year. I think the last time we Skyped was too long ago, where our doppelgangers probably met up. And
something like this. Yep.
We had to reconnect on Skype to make sure we're talking to the same person, not from parallel universes.
Cool.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Let's see. Anybody else? Okay, no, I think we're all good, and everyone thinks you're just simply awesome. So I have an "You're awesome" animated GIF right in front of your Skype picture. You're just awesome. And yes, thank you so much, Chris, for spending your time with us. It's more than an hour, and it's a good thing you're not on the East Coast of America. Otherwise, you'd be extremely tired and exhausted right now. But I think it's lunchtime for you, right?
It's Here in Japan, it's 12:30 in the afternoon. Yep, lunchtime.
Ready for lunch. So everyone's saying thank you, Chris. Mike Brunt says thank you, Chris, for these insights. Bill Lynch says very interesting stuff. Thank you, Chris. Gary says fantastic stories, and so on and so forth. Everyone's quite enamored with the time that you spent with us, and I'm particularly honored again to spend time with you, and so happy to see you and that you're doing well and you're still doing such wonderful musical journeys in Japan.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Well, I'll catch up with you again, Chris, sometime soon over Skype.
And I want to thank all the people that were, checking on the live stream and asking good questions.
Yeah, they were fantastic bunch, as always. My viewers are highly intelligent people here. That's why they hang with me, you see.
Cool.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay.
Take care.
Talk to you again.
Sign off on
Bye-bye.
Skype. Yep. Take care, please. Talk to you soon.
Too.
Okay.
Be safe. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye. Okay, folks, I hope that you enjoyed yourself. I see more people turning up. I see the numbers of virtual bodies increasing every minute. It's just kind of fun. This was a particularly long live stream, but I think it was worth the time we spent. Chris has such interesting stories, and I'm a lover of stories. I could sit and listen to someone tell me stories for hours and hours on end. Just give me a good mug of hot chocolate and I'm good to go kind of person. So it's always great to hear stories. Stories in real life is history. Hence, I'm a history lover. Get it? Okay, you guys, thank you so much again, and please subscribe and pass this channel information on. I'd love to have more people on to party with us virtually so we can have more interesting and enlightening and revealing shows with our guests. I do have one interesting guest next week. So far, it looks like Stephen Faulkner will be with us next weekend. Stephen Faulkner is a music journalist, and not just any journalist. He was editor-in-chief with the very instrumental magazine, Keyboard Magazine. Keyboard Magazine featured in many of our lives who were keyboard enthusiasts, and then when we went from analog to digital and having computers and the such, using DOS and the such in our lives, Keyboard Magazine took the lead and included articles on such new technologies for us. So Stephen Faulkner, editor-in-chief from 2009 to 2015 with Keyboard Magazine. If everything pans out well, he will be with us. So again, thank you guys for spending the time with me. It's great to see you all. Again, I know I've said this, but please pass this channel along. I'd like to see a larger turnout. Otherwise, you guys stay safe and have a great day, and here is an applause for you all. Take care, and I'll see you next Saturday or Sunday, depending on where you live in the world. Bye, guys.